Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're the channel that shares the unconditional agape love of God, and today we are finally launching the very first session of our new series, the Agape Archive.
Yes, I have been looking forward to this for so long. It's more than just excitement. There's a real sense of awe, you know? A kind of holy trembling at the idea of exploring God's love.
I feel exactly the same way. And just so you know, this series is produced by restructuring some really high-quality theological research sent to us by Missionary Hong-Jin Yun, who's currently serving in Canada.
That's right. So this is going to be a real deep dive.
It is. Since this is our first time, I thought we'd start with a huge macro perspective. We're going to trace how humanity's understanding of God's love has, well, evolved throughout history.
And this isn't just a history of, religious feelings. It's a look at the fundamental, let's call it the paradigm of the relationship between us and the source of existence, how that has shifted.
A paradigm of a relationship. I like that. So we're tracking a journey from, fear to commitment.
From fear to commitment, and then ultimately to unconditional sacrifice.
That sounds like an exhausting evolution for the human mind to process. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start at the beginning, way back in ancient times. Pre-covenant. What did that relationship even look like?
Well, in that ancient pre-covenant era, the foundational feeling wasn't love. Not at all. It was dread.
Dread.
The divine was perceived, first and foremost, as just overwhelming power.
Like raw cosmic energy. Unpredictable.
Exactly. If you look at, say, Mesopotamian myths or even the Greco-Roman stories, the gods were powerful, yes, but they were often so selfish.
Right. They had their own dramas.
Totally. They were easily angered, driven by their own jealousies, and they were incredibly fickle. They weren't operating based on some grand plan for human welfare. Their actions were, for the most part, random.
So your fate was basically tied to their mood on any given day.
Yeah.
That must have created just immense anxiety. You were always walking on eggshells.
Precisely. And that environment naturally produced a purely transactional relationship. You couldn't just trust that the gods inherently cared for you. Divine favor wasn't a given. It was a reward you had to desperately try to get.
Through what? Sacrifices?
Through constant sacrifice and very specific rituals, all of it designed to just appease their potential anger. Think of it less as a relationship and more like paying spiritual insurance.
So the highest form of love you could even hope for was... well, it was extremely limited, wasn't it?
It was minimal. Love was just defined as the state of not being harmed. Or maybe you'd get some small temporary blessings, a good harvest, safety from a plague. The idea that a supreme being could intrinsically care about your individual soul, independent of what you did, that was just alien to the ancient world.
Okay, so that transactional dread.
Yeah.
That really sets the stage for a monumental shift, because with the establishment of the covenant, especially with Israel, the whole relationship moves from that fear-based transaction to a binding promise.
And this is where we get the first truly profound theological concept of love, Hesed. That's H-E-S-E-D. It's an Old Testament term that often gets watered down. People translate it as mercy or kindness, but it's so much richer than that.
It's not just a feeling, then?
Not at all. Hesed isn't a passing good mood. It is covenantal, steadfast love.
Covenantal. So it's based on commitment, a duty almost.
That is the key distinction. It's a willful love. It's anchored in a divine oath, and it's sustained even when the recipient humanity is completely undeserving, even when we've broken our side of the deal.
So the love exists because of the promise itself.
Because of the promise, not because we're worthy of it.
And this is also when the imagery of the divine starts to warm up, isn't it? We move from that distant, overwhelming force to something more personal.
Oh, absolutely. In books like Deuteronomy and the Psalms, you suddenly start hearing God spoken of in these intensely personal, warm terms. As a caring father who lifts you up, or even a nurturing mother who could never forget her child. This was a radical humanization of a transcendent being.
But even with Hesed, this commitment was often, painful, right? Because the human side kept failing.
The prophets really illustrate the tremendous cost of Hesed. I mean, look at the prophet Hosea. The entire book is an analogy. God is enduring a suffering love, constantly pursuing and waiting for his spouse, Israel, who has betrayed the marriage commitment again and again.
Wow.
That persistence, despite constant betrayal, that's the heart of Old Testament love. It showed that divine commitment could actually suffer for the one it loves.
It sounds like even with Hesed, people still struggled. The promise was there, but the performance wasn't, which left people feeling perpetually guilty. So if that was the peak, what happened next to just completely shatter that concept and build something new?
That leads us to the ultimate turning point. The arrival of Jesus, which the sources call a total revolution of love. We're moving beyond the contractual commitment of Hesed to the complete self-gift of agape, A-G-A-P-E.
And the New Testament writers were very deliberate about using this specific word, weren't they?
Yeah.
They had other options for love.
They did, and this is so important. They could have used Eros, which is that upward, acquisitive love, the desire to possess something valuable, or they could have used Philia, which is more of a reciprocal friendship love.
Oh, but they didn't.
They intentionally chose agape, which was a rarely used word, to signal something radically new. It means unconditional, self-sacrificial, divine love that demands absolutely nothing in return.
Okay, let's ground that distinction. So if Eros is me wanting a beautiful painting because it's valuable, what's agape?
Agape is the artist giving that beautiful painting to someone who just tried to burn down his studio, simply to demonstrate the artist's own character. It's the grace that grants value to the worthless, rather than the desire to possess the valuable.
Wow. And the most dramatic evidence of this shift is that love was no longer just an idea. It became a physical event.
That event is the incarnation. Love became tangible. It wasn't a decree from heaven anymore. It was God literally suffering, eating, and living right alongside humanity. The whole concept of God became approachable, visible. Emmanuel, God is with us.
But if agape is truly unconditional, why did the early church rely so heavily on the cross? I mean, sacrifice feels like a transaction, a price being paid.
That's such a crucial distinction to make. The cross wasn't the price humanity paid to earn love. It was the ultimate confirmation of love that was already given.
Oh, okay.
Like it says in Romans 5:8, God demonstrated his love while we were still sinners. It confirmed that the scope of this love was boundless. Hesed was covenantal, mostly for Israel. But agape is universal and indiscriminate. It embraces enemies, outsiders, everyone.
And this leads to what the sources call the monumental leap in human perception, which comes from the Apostle John.
Yes. John basically redefined reality. He declared that love isn't just an attribute of God, something God does when he's in a good mood. He said it's God's very essence.
God is love.
God is love. That statement makes agape the defining character of the source of all existence.
That's a powerful apex. But of course, history didn't stop there. As the centuries rolled on, the human response to this ultimate free gift, seems to have created a massive tension.
Yeah.
How did people try to live this out, or maybe rationalize it?
Well, the post-New Testament centuries were a real struggle, an institutional and philosophical struggle to contain this radical freedom. If you look at the early and medieval periods, the institutional church often found itself sliding backward.
Back to the old transactional model.
Exactly. The church often emphasized God as this harsh judge, demanding works or penance, confession, good deeds as the required payment to get back the love you lost through sin. It's the anxiety of the ancient world creeping back in.
But at the same time, you had the mystics who just completely rejected that.
They did. People like Augustine or the later mystics, they emphasized union, a spiritual marriage with God. For them, love wasn't about paying off a debt. It was about the soul just melting into the divine presence.
And then you have someone like Thomas Aquinas who tried to bridge that gap, the gap between cold law and warm feeling.
Aquinas was brilliant. He tried to find a middle path by defining love as friendship, amicitia, between God and man. It suggested a voluntary mutual relationship, grounding the idea in philosophy while still honoring that spiritual connection.
Let's jump forward to the Reformation. The whole movement seems like a powerful correction against that medieval tendency to earn God's love.
It was a sharp recentering for sure. Figures like Luther and Calvin forcefully emphasized grace. They reasserted that love is entirely a sovereign gift from God, received completely apart from any human merit or works. They were swinging the pendulum back to the pure, unconditional agape of the New Testament.
And then came the Enlightenment, which in its search for rational order brought a kind of cold shift to the whole discussion.
Reason became king and divine personality took a back seat. The result was deism. God was reduced to a distant watchmaker. He designed the perfect universe, wound it up, and then just stepped back.
No more interventions.
None. So love got stripped of its passion. It was reduced to orderly natural law and abstract morality.
So God's love became a set of predictable but very distant laws. It's clean, but it lacks any warmth.
Precisely. And that distance caused an inevitable counter-reaction in the Romantic era. People like Schleiermacher. They tried to find love not in cold reason, but in deep subjective feelings of absolute dependence on the divine. If the Enlightenment was the head, Romanticism was the heart, just yearning for that connection again.
Okay, now we're in the modern era. with philosophical scrutiny, where the differences between human desire and divine love are really laid bare.
And we have to talk about Ender's Nigrin here. He drew a crucial line in the sand between that upward human Eros, our natural desire to search for and possess value, and the downward divine Agape, the act that gives value to what is worthless. Nigrin argued that the integrity of Christian love depends entirely on keeping Agape distinct, a completely unmotivated descending force.
That makes perfect sense because if you approach God with Eros, you're always trying to prove you're valuable enough to be loved.
Exactly, you're performing. And the final shift we see with thinkers like Emmanuel Levinas changes the focus again. God's love is seen not primarily as comfort for me, for the self, but as a severe responsibility that I feel towards the face of the suffering other.
How does that change the application of love?
It means love becomes an ethical demand, not just a spiritual reward. The moment you see suffering, the divine love is activated not in your feeling of warmth, but in the immediate ethical demand to respond. It moves love out of the church and into the street.
Wow. Okay, so if we connect all these sources, it's clear humanity's definition of love has just been in constant motion, a relentless attempt to pin down what exactly we're receiving.
The history shows a clear progression of our perception. Love changed from begging, that's ancient fear, to promise with Hesed, to sacrifice with Agape, then to reason and the Enlightenment, and now to existential responsibility.
But the core takeaway, the truth that anchors this whole deep dive, is the distinction between God's love itself and our perception of it.
That is the most profound synthesis. God's love has been the unchanging sun. But human perception, the clouds of our historical, theological, and philosophical limitations, is what has continually shifted, obscured, or distorted that light. Agape never changed its character. We just kept putting up new filters.
So why should you, the listener, care about this massive historical journey?
It raises a really immediate question for your life today. When you unconsciously let those ancient clouds define your relationship with God, when you see His love as a conditional transaction that you have to earn, your life is filled with anxiety and exhaustion. You're basically living in the pre-covenant era.
But when you fully receive the knowledge of unconditional agape, it changes everything about your daily existence.
You gain true freedom, freedom from the burden of having to justify yourself. You stop trying to earn love, and instead you just become a channel of that same love to others. Understanding this history is an existential matter. It determines the quality and freedom of your life right now.
This deep dive really reveals that the ultimate mission is. It's the correction of false perception. If the history of human consciousness has been a search for who God is, and the ultimate discovery was agape, unconditional, self-sacrificial love, what new dimensions of that love will you discover when you choose to fully abandon that old transactional lens today? Everyone, how did you find this first session of the Agape Archive? I sincerely hope it was a beneficial time for you to understand God's love both deeply and, well, broadly.
Your comments, subscriptions, and likes are a huge help in spreading God's love around the world. Please, if you found this valuable, share it with your loved ones and friends. We'll be back next time with even better content. Thank you.